The alarm came through on a Tuesday, which was unfortunate, because Tuesdays in the Concordance Senate were reserved for budget disputes, and no one was in the mood for an extinction-level threat. Senator Vale Orenti was mid-sentence, arguing about the allocation of mining rights in the Outer Ring, when the strategic display above the chamber floor turned red. Not amber. Not the soft orange that meant a border skirmish or a trade dispute. Red. The deep, arterial red that meant someone had built something they were never supposed to build. The chamber went quiet. 412 senators from 309 species looked up at the display. The image resolved slowly, as if the censors themselves were reluctant to confirm what they saw. A ship. But calling it a ship was like calling an ocean a puddle. It was a structure the size of a small moon, still under construction in the dark space beyond the Keth Drift. Scaffolding clung to its hull like frost on a window. Welding sparks bloomed along its spine in slow, silent bursts. And at its center, where a reactor should have been, there was instead a cavity. A hollow space shaped to focus energy into a single, directed point. A planet killer. No, said Senator Orenti. She said it softly, almost to herself. Then louder. No. That is not possible. The tonnage accords. The tonnage accords are being violated, said the chamber's artificial intelligence, its voice flat and calm in the way that made everything worse. The structure exceeds maximum permitted tonnage by a factor of 9,000. Construction is estimated at 73% complete. Projected completion, 11 days. The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of 412 people doing very fast arithmetic in their heads, calculating what this meant, who was responsible, and whether they would survive the week. The Keth Drift belonged to no one. It was a dead zone, a stretch of space between two aging stars where nothing grew and nothing lived. The Concordance had designated it a waste region 3 centuries ago. No patrols. No monitoring stations. No reason for anyone to look there. Which, of course, was exactly why someone had chosen it. Who? Asked Senator Thren Vass, rising from the delegation of the Vass Collective. His species was tall and thin, built like folded paper, and his voice carried the particular sharpness of someone who had already decided who to blame. Who built this? The AI displayed a registry signature. The whole plating bore the mark of the Orti separatist faction, a breakaway group from Senator Orenti's own species. Not the government. Not the military. A faction. A splinter. A group of radicals who had been shouting about sovereignty and self-determination for 2 decades and whom everyone had politely ignored. Senator Orenti closed her eyes. She felt the weight of 400 gazes settle on her like snowfall. This is not sanctioned, she said. This is not known to the Orti government. I will contact our military command immediately, Anne. With respect, said Thren Vass, the question is not what you will do, Senator. The question is what we will do. The tonnage accords are clear. A violation of this magnitude triggers Article 9. A murmur moved through the chamber. Article 9. Everyone knew what Article 9 said. Everyone also knew that Article 9 had never been invoked. Not once in the Concordance's 400-year history. It was a clause written in the founding charter, a relic of a time when the galaxy was younger and more frightened. It read, in the event of a violation of the tonnage accords that threatens the survival of one or more member species, the Concordance shall invoke the enforcement mandate and transmit a call to the designated arbiters. The designated arbiters. The humans. Senator Orenti opened her eyes. You cannot be serious. I am entirely serious, said Thren Vass. The humans are a myth. The humans are written into the founding charter. Article 9, Section 4, Paragraph 12. They are the designated enforcement mechanism. The clause is legally binding. The clause is 400 years old, said Orenti. It was written by frightened diplomats who needed a bogeyman to make the accords stick. Behave, or the humans will come. That is what it is. A nursery rhyme. A legal fairy tale. And yet, said Vass, it is the law. The chamber erupted. Senators shouted over one another. Some called for immediate military mobilization. Others argued for diplomacy, for back-channel negotiations with the separatists. A few, mostly from the older species, sat very still and said nothing, their faces carrying the particular expression of people who remembered stories their grandparents had told them. Stories about pale, soft-skinned creatures who moved between stars like weather. Who broke things without meaning to. Who left before anyone could thank them or curse them. The speaker of the chamber, a broad, slow-moving being named Gorath, raised one heavy hand. The noise died. We will vote, Gorath said. Not on whether the humans are real. That is not our question. Our question is whether we invoke Article 9. Whether we send the transmission. It costs nothing to send a signal into empty space. And if the clause is a fairy tale, as Senator Orenti suggests, then no one will answer, and we will proceed with conventional military response. But if the clause is not a fairy tale, and we do not send it, then we will have failed in our legal obligation on the day it mattered. The vote was called. It passed, 341 to 71. Not because anyone believed. Because it was easier to send a message into the dark than to argue about whether the dark was listening. The transmission was composed by the chamber's legal office. Formal. Dry. Citing the relevant statutes. It was addressed to the Human Arbitration Fleet Designated Enforcement Authority, Charter Reference 001 Alpha. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every known language, directed outward in all directions simultaneously. Then the concordance went back to arguing about mining rights, because the planet killer was 11 days away and the budget meeting was already 2 hours over. No one expected an answer. The transmission traveled outward at the speed of light, then faster, folded through relay stations and bounced off dead moons. It crossed the Keth Drift. It passed through the shipping lanes and the trade corridors and the quiet, empty spaces between. It traveled for 3 days. On the 4th day, something answered. The concordance detection grid registered them at 0400 hours, station time. 3 contacts, dropping out of folded space at the edge of the Senate system. Not a fleet. Not an armada. 3 ships. The operator on duty, a young woman named Kale, stared at her screen for a long time. She ran the scan again. Then a 3rd time. Then she picked up her comm unit and called her supervisor. Sir. You need to come look at this. Her supervisor, a thick-bodied man named Dorov, shuffled over in his dressing gown, because it was 4 in the morning and he had not been expecting to be woken for anything less than a supernova. He looked at the screen. He blinked. What am I looking at? 3 ships. Just arrived. They came in on a fold trajectory that I can't plot. The origin point is. I don't know. It's not in our charts. It's not in anyone's charts. Dorov leaned closer. The ships were small. Absurdly small. The largest was perhaps 200 meters long, a blunt, ugly thing with too many antenna arrays and a hole that looked like it had been patched so many times the patches had patches. The second was smaller, maybe 150 meters, listing slightly to port as if one of its stabilizers was failing. The third was barely 100 meters, more engine than hull, trailing a faint plume of coolant vapor like a dog dragging a leash. They were not warships. They were not even close to warships. They looked like cargo haulers. Like maintenance vessels. Like the kind of small, tired ships that moved between stations carrying spare parts and frozen food. Are they hailing us? Dorov asked. No, sir. They're just sitting there. Holding position at the edge of the system. Engines on minimal burn. Dorov stared at the screen. He thought about the transmission sent 4 days ago. He thought about the vote. He thought about the fairy tale. Get me the Senate, he said. Wake them up. All of them. By noon, the Senate chamber was full again. The display showed the 3 ships, magnified now, every scar and patch and welding seam visible. They hung in space like 3 old dogs waiting outside a door, patient and slightly confused. Their registry codes match no known species, said the AI. However, the whole composition, the atmospheric readings from the smallest vessel, and the linguistic markers on the ship names are consistent with the theoretical profile of. Say it, said Gorath. The theoretical profile of the species designated a human in the founding charter. The chamber was very quiet. Senator Orenti stood. This is a coincidence. A misidentification. These could be anyone. Salvagers. Traders. The registry codes could be forged. Senator, said the AI, the largest vessel is broadcasting a transponder signal. I will play it now. A sound filled the chamber. It was not a voice. It was a tone, followed by a string of numbers, followed by a voice. The voice was tired. Flat. The voice of someone who had been awake too long and was reading from a script they had read 10,000 times before. This is Arbitration Vessel 1, callsign Long Watch. We are responding to Concordance Enforcement Transmission 7741 Delta. Please confirm receipt and advise on nature of violation. We are en route. Please confirm. A pause. Then, quieter, almost as if the speaker had forgotten the microphone was open. God, it's actually real. Someone actually called. The chamber stared at the display. 3 small ships. 1 tired voice. Gorath spoke first. Open a channel. The channel opened. The face that appeared on the main screen was not what anyone had expected. The humans in the old stories were described in extremes. Giants. Monsters. Gods with burning eyes. The face on the screen was none of these things. It was a woman, perhaps 50, perhaps older, with close-cropped gray hair and deep lines around her mouth. She wore a uniform that had been mended so many times the original color was gone, replaced by a patchwork of slightly different shades. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked like someone who had been woken from a nap and handed a crisis. Behind her, the bridge of the Long Watch was visible. It was small. Cramped. 2 other figures sat at consoles, one asleep with their head on the panel, the other staring at a screen with the blank expression of someone who had been staring at it for a very long time. Concordance Senate, said the woman. This is Commander Yael Doss, Arbitration Patrol, 9th Rotation. I confirm receipt of Enforcement Transmission 7741 Delta. We are here. She paused. Swallowed. I have to ask. Is this real? Is this an actual invocation, or is this a test? Because we've had false alarms before. 3 of them, over the years. Each time we burned fuel we couldn't replace, chasing a signal that turned out to be a relay echo. Goreth stepped forward. This is real, Commander. The Concordance has invoked Article 9. A tonnage accords violation is in progress. We require enforcement. Yael Doss nodded slowly. She did not look relieved. She looked frightened. Understood, she said. Can you transmit the violation data? Coordinates, tonnage, construction status. Everything you have. The data was sent. Yael Doss looked at it. The 2 figures behind her stirred. The one who had been asleep lifted their head and squinted at the screen. The other went very still. That's a planet killer, said the one who had been asleep. A man, younger than Doss, with a beard that needed trimming and a burn scar across his left cheek. His voice was hoarse. That's not a tonnage violation. That's a genocide platform. I can see what it is, Rennick, said Doss. We have 3 ships, Yael. 3 ships. That thing is 9,000 times over tonnage. What are we supposed to do? File a strongly worded. I am aware of our resources, Rennick. The 3rd figure, the one who had been staring at the screen, turned. A woman, younger than the other 2, dark-skinned, with her hair pulled back in a tight knot. She said nothing. She just looked at the data, then at Doss, then back at the data. Her expression was very calm. The kind of calm that meant she was doing arithmetic in her head and not liking the answer. Doss turned back to the screen. To the 412 senators watching her. Concordant Senate, she said. We acknowledge the invocation. We will proceed to the Keth Drift to assess and enforce. But I need to be transparent with you because you deserve that. She straightened. We are 3 ships. Crew complement is 7. 7 people. We have been on continuous patrol for 912 years. Our vessels they are not what they were. We are not what the Charter envisioned. We do not have an armada. We do not have a fleet. We have 3 ships, 7 people, and a legal mandate that says we have to show up. She paused. We will show up. That is what we do. But I need you to understand what you are asking us to do, and I need you to decide whether that is enough. The channel closed. The screen went dark. 412 senators sat in silence. Then Threnvas stood. Well, he said. The fairy tale has 3 ships and 7 people. How very disappointing. Senator Orenti turned to him. They have been out there for 900 years, Vas. Alone. Maintaining a route that we forgot existed. And your first response is disappointment? My first response, said Vas, is realism. They cannot fight a planet killer. They are 3 maintenance vessels with a legal fiction painted on the hull. We need a real military response, not a patrol of ghosts. We need both, said Goreth. And we need to stop talking and start moving. The 3 ships moved toward the Keth Drift at the best speed they could manage, which was not fast. The Long Watch, the largest of the 3, could sustain a full jump every 14 hours, but each jump stressed its aging frame. The second ship, the quiet Meridian, had a faulty stabilizer that made long jumps nauseating for the crew. The third, the small Kindness, leaked coolant and had to stop every 6 hours to vent and repair. They were not a fleet. They were a convoy of tired machines, crewed by tired people, moving toward a threat they could not fight. On the bridge of the Long Watch, Commander Yael Doss sat in her chair and did not move. She had been in that chair for 19 years. The padding had worn thin. The armrests were cracked. She knew every sound the ship made, every groan of metal, every flicker of the overhead lights. The Long Watch was not a warship. It had never been a warship. It was an arbitration vessel built for showing up, for being seen, for the quiet authority of presence. It had 2 defensive cannons, mounted more for tradition than function, and a hull rated for atmospheric entry but not for sustained combat. Rennick sat at the weapons console, which was a generous term for the panel in front of him. It had 2 toggles, one for each cannon, and a targeting display that flickered if you looked at it wrong. He ran his fingers over the toggles. He had done this every day for 23 years. He was 46. He had joined the patrol at 23, straight out of the academy, full of the particular enthusiasm of a young person who believed they were volunteering for something important. 23 years later, the enthusiasm was gone. What remained was habit. And the burn scar on his cheek, from a coolant leak in year 4 that had nearly killed him and that no one had been able to treat properly because the medical bay's surgical unit had broken in year 2 and they had no replacement parts. 912 years, he said, to no one in particular. 912 years, and this is what it comes to? 3 ships against a moon. 4, said the third crew member. Lena Vasek. She was the navigator, the engineer, the medic, and the cook, because the small Kindness had lost its dedicated engineer in year 612 and no replacement had ever come. She was 38, the youngest of the 7. She had been born on the patrol. Literally born on it, in the cramped medical bay of the quiet Meridian, delivered by her mother, who had been the previous medic. Lena had never seen a planet. Not with her own feet on the ground. She had seen them through viewports, from a distance, always moving, always passing through. For what? Rennick asked. For options. I've been running the numbers. Lena pulled up a schematic on her screen. The planet killer, ugly and vast, rotating slowly in the dark. Option 1, we arrive, we hail them, we demand they stand down under the authority of the charter. They laugh at us. They finish construction. They fire. We watch. Cheerful, said Rennick. Option 2, we arrive, we don't hail, we target their construction scaffolding with our 2 cannons. We do cosmetic damage. They swat us like flies. They finish construction. They fire. We die watching. And option 3? Option 3, we don't go. We turn around. We tell the Concordance that enforcement is impossible with our current resources. We file a report. We go back to the route. We wait for someone else to solve it. Rennick looked at Doss. Doss did not look up. And option 4? Doss asked. Lena was quiet for a moment. Option 4, we go. We do what we can. And we trust that showing up is enough to make someone else show up too. The bridge was silent. The ship groaned around them, the sound of old metal adjusting to the stress of another fold jump. We go, said Doss. We go because that is the job. We go because 912 years of going is not something you walk away from. We go because if we don't, then the whole thing was for nothing. Every year, every repair, every cold meal and broken heater and night spent listening to the whole creak and wondering if this was the night it finally gave out. All of it. For nothing. She looked up. Her eyes were dry. They had been dry for a long time. We go. And we do our best. And if our best isn't enough, then at least we were there. At least someone was there. Rennick nodded. Lena nodded. Somewhere in the back of the ship, the other 4 crew members heard the decision through the intercom and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. They had known, all of them, since the transmission came in. They were going. They had always been going. That was what the Long Watch was. Not a warship. Not a fleet. A promise, kept by small hands, in the dark, for longer than anyone could reasonably ask. The Concordance, meanwhile, was arguing. This was, in the view of several senior senators, exactly what the Concordance did best. The Planet Killer was 7 days from completion, and the Senate had formed 4 committees, 2 subcommittees, and 1 exploratory working group to discuss the appropriate response. The military option was on the table. The Concordance maintained a defense fleet, as all governing bodies did. It was not large. It was designed for peacekeeping, for border disputes, for the occasional pirate suppression. It was not designed to engage a structure 9,000 times over tonnage. The fleet admiral said so, plainly, in a closed session that was immediately leaked to the press. "We can hurt it," said Admiral Koss, a heavy-set woman with a shaved head and no patience for politics. "We can damage the scaffolding, disrupt the construction. But we cannot destroy it. Not before it completes. Not with what we have. And once it completes and fires, even once, there will be no second chance. The target will be a populated world. They've already announced which one. Vale Prime. 4 billion people. Then we destroy it before it completes," said Thren Vass. "With what? Our heaviest cruiser carries enough ordnance to crack a continental shelf. That thing is the size of a moon. We would need to hit it continuously for weeks to do structural damage, and it has defensive systems. It has crew. Thousands of them. Separatists who believe they are building a weapon of liberation. They will fight. Then we negotiate," said another senator. "With people building a genocide platform," asked Orenti. "What do we offer them? A nicer planet to destroy." The arguments circled. The committees met and unmet and met again. The working group produced a 17-page document on the legal implications of preemptive military action in a neutral zone, which no one read. And through all of it, the 3 small ships moved slowly toward the Keth Drift, growing no larger, gaining no reinforcements, carrying 7 people who had already decided what they were going to do and did not need a committee to tell them. Senator Orenti watched the tracking display in her office. 3 dots, moving. Slowly. She thought about Yoel Doss's face on the screen. The tiredness in it. The steadiness. The way she had said "we will show up" as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As if showing up, after 900 years, was not an act of extraordinary stubbornness but simply the next item on a very long list. Orenti picked up her comm unit. She called Gorath. "We need to help them," she said. "They are the designated arbiters," Gorath said. "The charter places enforcement in their hands." The charter was written 400 years ago by people who assumed the arbiters would have a fleet. They have 3 ships. 7 people. The charter did not account for this. Then what do you propose? Orenti thought. I propose we stop treating them like a myth and start treating them like people. They are out there. They are coming. They are going to fly 3 broken ships into the teeth of a planet killer because a piece of paper told them to. And we are going to sit here and form committees while they do it. That is not enforcement. That is sacrifice. And it is ours to make, not theirs. Gorath was quiet for a long time. Bring it to the floor, he said. Tomorrow. First session. The Long Watch dropped out of fold space 6 days from the Keth drift. The jump had been rough. A coupling in the port engine had sheared, and the ship shuddered for 20 seconds before the backup systems caught. In the engineering bay, a young man named Tobin, 24, the youngest of the 7, had been thrown against a bulkhead and was now pressing a cold pack to his shoulder while swearing quietly in 3 languages. You all right? Asked Lena, sliding down the ladder from the bridge. I will be, Tobin said. The coupling won't. Can you fix it? I can make it hold. For another jump, maybe 2. After that, we need a proper dock. A real one. Not a patch job. There are no docks where we're going. Tobin looked at her. I know. Lena helped him up. She checked the coupling herself, running her fingers over the metal, feeling for stress fractures. The engineering bay was cold. It was always cold. The heating system on the Long Watch had been failing in stages for the last 200 years, and they had long since given up trying to fix it properly. They wore layers. They slept in layers. They had learned to live in the cold the way you learn to live with a bad knee. You adjust. You compensate. You stop noticing until someone asks you about it and you realize you have been shivering for a decade. The 7 of them gathered for the evening meal in the small galley on the Long Watch's 2nd deck. It was a room meant for 12, but the extra chairs had been removed centuries ago to make space for storage. The table was scarred and stained. The food was reconstituted protein and dried vegetables, the same meal they had eaten, in slight variation, for longer than any of them had been alive. The original supply caches had been restocked so many times that the current rations were produced by a company that had gone out of business 300 years ago. They ate them anyway. Doss sat at the head of the table. Rennick to her left. Lena to her right. Then Tobin. Then Marin, the communications officer, a quiet woman of 60 who had not spoken more than 10 words in a day since year 15 of her service. Then Cale, the 2nd engineer, who was missing 2 fingers on his right hand from an accident in year 8 and who ate his food with a particular, practiced efficiency that suggested he had learned not to waste a single bite. And finally, old Davin, who was 73 and who had been on the patrol longer than anyone. He sat at the far end of the table and mostly listened. He had been 20 when he joined. 53 years of service. He remembered when there had been 11 crew members. He remembered when there had been 5 ships. No one spoke for a while. They ate. The ship hummed around them, the low, constant vibration of engines that had been running for so long they had become geological. 6 days, Doss said, finally. To the drift. 5.5 if we push the folds, said Lena. We push them. The quiet meridian's stabilizer. We'll hold. It has to hold. Rennick set down his fork. And when we get there? What's the plan? We've talked about the options, but we haven't talked about the plan. Doss was quiet for a moment. She looked at the table. At the scars in the wood. At the ring stains from 1,000 cups of reconstituted coffee. We hail them, she said. We identify ourselves under the Charter. We demand they cease construction and submit to arbitration. We give them the full legal citation. Every clause. Every penalty. We do it by the book, because the book is all we have. And if they refuse? Then we position ourselves between the weapon and veil prime. We put our ships in the firing line. Not because we can stop it. Because we can make them fire through us first. Because that makes it a different kind of act. A conscious choice. And we broadcast everything. Every second. Every channel. The whole galaxy watches. That's not a plan, Rennick said. That's a funeral. It's a plan, said old Davin from the far end of the table. His voice was rough, unused. He spoke rarely, and when he did, people listened. It's the only plan we've ever had. Show up. Be seen. Make them look at you. That's what the patrol has always been. Not a weapon. A witness. The table went quiet. Tobin pressed his cold pack harder against his shoulder. Marin stared at her food. Kale flexed his 3 remaining fingers. It might not work, Lena said. No, said Doss. It might not. And we might die. Yes. Lena nodded. She picked up her fork. She ate another bite of dried vegetables. She chewed slowly, swallowed, and said, then we'd better make sure the broadcast equipment is working. Doss almost smiled. Almost. It was the closest thing to humor any of them had managed in days, and it settled over the table like a small, warm thing. They finished the meal. They cleaned the plates. They went back to their stations, their bunks, their small and endless tasks. The ship moved on. 3 ships, 7 people, 5.5 days from the end of the world or the end of themselves. The session was called at dawn. 412 senators. Full attendance. No absences, no proxies. The chamber was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system cycling. Gorith stood at the podium. He did not use the AI to introduce the topic. He spoke himself, in his own voice, which was deep and slow and carried the weight of his years. 6 days ago, we sent a transmission into the dark. We did not expect an answer. We sent it because the law required it, and because it was easier than admitting that the law was a hollow thing. A story we told ourselves to avoid the harder work of building real security. The dark answered. 3 ships. 7 people. They have been maintaining the arbitration patrol for 912 years. They have been alone. Unfunded. Unremembered. They have kept a promise that we forgot we made. And now they are flying toward a planet killer with 2 defensive cannons and a legal citation, because that is what the Charter asks of them. The question before this Senate is not whether the humans are real. They are real. They are in our system, in 3 small ships, eating ration packs and patching engine couplings and preparing to die because we ask them to. The question is whether we will let them die alone. Or whether we will stand with them. He stepped back. The floor is open. Senator Orenti stood first. I move that the Concordance Defense Fleet be mobilized in support of the arbitration patrol. Not as a replacement. As a reinforcement. The humans invoked the Charter. They are the enforcement authority. We support them. We do not supersede them. We stand behind them, not in front of them. Threnvas stood. And if their plan fails? If 3 ships and 2 cannons cannot stop a planet killer? Do we send our fleet to die alongside them out of sentiment? Yes, said Orenti. If that is what it takes. Because the alternative is to watch 7 people fly into a genocide weapon while we form another committee. And I will not do that. I will not sit in this chamber and let them die because their ships are too small and ours are too slow and our politics are too cowardly to act. The debate lasted 4 hours. It was not gentle. Senators shouted. Accusations were made. Old grudges surfaced. 3 delegations walked out and came back. 2 amendments were proposed and defeated. 1 senator called the humans a convenient fiction that absolves us of responsibility, and was met with a silence so pointed he sat down and did not speak again. The vote was called at midday. The motion passed. 389 to 23. The Concordance defense fleet would mobilize. Every available ship. Every available crew. They would move to the Keth Drift in support of the arbitration patrol. Not to replace them. To stand with them. Admiral Koss received the order at 1,300 hours. She read it twice. Then she called her fleet commanders. We're going, she said. All of us. Everything we have. Ma'am, said her deputy, our fleet is not built for this engagement. The tonnage differential. I know what the differential is. We're going anyway. Because 7 people in 3 ships are already on their way, and they've been doing this for 900 years without asking for help. The least we can do is show up. The fleet began to move. 43 ships. Not an armada. Not enough. But more than 3. More than 7 people alone. The Keth Drift was exactly as ugly as its name suggested. 2 dying stars cast a thin, sickly light over a field of debris and dead rock. No planets. No stations. No life. Just dust and silence and the slow, grinding pull of weak gravity. The planet killer hung in the center of it all. It was worse than the scans had suggested. Worse than the projections. It was not just large. It was wrong. The shape of it was aggressive, all sharp angles and hard lines, as if it had been designed not just to destroy but to offend. The scaffolding was falling away now, construction nearly complete. The central cavity was sealed. The focusing array was in place. In 36 hours, the weapon would be operational. The separatist fleet surrounded it. 200 ships. Military grade. Crewed by soldiers who believed they were building a future for their people. Who believed that Vale Prime, with its 4 billion inhabitants, was a legitimate target in a war for sovereignty. Who had been told that the Concordance would never act. That no one would come. They were wrong about the second part. The Long Watch dropped out of fold space at the edge of the drift. Then the quiet Meridian, listing, groaning, but holding. Then the small Kindness, trailing its plume of coolant, engines sputtering but alive. 3 ships. 7 people. Against 200 warships and a moon-sized gun. Doss stood on the bridge. She smoothed her uniform. She checked the broadcast equipment. She checked it again. She opened the channel. This is Arbitration Vessel 1, callsign Long Watch, operating under Concordance Charter Article 9, Enforcement Mandate. We are addressing the Construction Authority in the Keth Drift. You are in violation of the Tonnage Accords, Section 4, Maximum Permitted Tonnage. You are ordered to cease all construction immediately, power down the weapons system, and submit to arbitration. You have 1 hour to comply. She paused. Looked at Rennick. He nodded. She continued. This is not a threat. This is a notification. The charter is clear. The penalty for non-compliance is total forfeiture of the vessel and prosecution of all personnel. We are the designated enforcement authority. We are here. We are waiting. The channel closed. The bridge was silent. They're not going to comply, said Rennick. No. Then what? Then we move to intercept position. Between the weapon and Vale Prime. And we wait. The 3 ships moved. Slowly. Deliberately. They positioned themselves in the firing corridor, the narrow lane of space through which the planet killer would channel its energy. 3 small ships, parked in the path of a genocide. The separatist fleet noticed. Comms lit up. Hails came in, angry, confused, dismissive. Unidentified vessels, you are in a restricted construction zone. Withdraw immediately or be fired upon. DOS opened the channel. This is Arbitration Vessel 1. We are not unidentified. We are the Human Arbitration Patrol operating under Concordance Charter Article 9. We have issued a cease and desist order. We will hold this position until compliance is achieved or enforcement is carried out. The humans are a myth. Everyone knows that. You are trespassing. Withdraw. We are not trespassing. We are enforcing. You have 53 minutes. The channel closed. Rennick looked at DOS. They're going to shoot us. Probably. Should we raise shields? We have shields. We have something the manual calls shields. It's more of a mild suggestion of density. Raise it anyway. Rennick raised the shields. The ship hummed. The lights dimmed slightly as power was diverted. Outside, the stars looked the same. Cold. Distant. Indifferent. 40 minutes passed. Then 30. Then 20. The separatist fleet shifted, repositioned, but did not fire. They were waiting. They were hoping the 3 small ships would lose their nerve and leave. The 3 small ships did not leave. 10 minutes. 5. 2. The separatist commander hailed again. Last warning. Withdraw or be destroyed. DOS opened the channel. We are holding position. Your construction is in violation. You have 1 minute to comply. The channel closed. DOS sat in her chair. She put her hands on the armrests. The cracked, worn armrests. She thought about 19 years in this chair. About the cold. About the patches on the hull. About the 7 people on 3 ships who had kept a promise for 900 years because no one else would. Broadcast is live, said Marin, from the communications console. Her voice was quiet, steady. Every channel. Every frequency. The whole galaxy is watching. Good, said DOS. 1 minute. The separatist fleet opened fire. The first volley was not aimed at the Long Watch. It was aimed at the space around it. A warning. A demonstration. Plasma bolts streaked past the 3 ships, close enough to make the hulls ring, close enough to make the shields flicker. Rennick gripped his console. Shields holding. Barely. They're testing us, said DOS. They want to see if we'll flinch. Are we going to flinch? No. The second volley was closer. A bolt struck the quiet Meridian's port side. The ship shuddered. On the bridge of the Long Watch, an alarm sounded. Quiet Meridian reports hull breach on Deck 3, said Marin. Sealed. Crew is fine. They're holding position. Good. The third volley was not a warning. It was aimed. A plasma bolt struck the small Kindness dead center. The shields absorbed it, barely. The ship lurched. Coolant sprayed from a ruptured line, freezing instantly in the vacuum, a brief cloud of white crystals that caught the starlight and glittered. Small Kindness reports engine damage, said Marin. They can hold position, but they can't maneuver. They're stationary. Understood. DOS opened the channel. This is Arbitration Vessel 1. You are firing on enforcement vessels operating under Concordance authority. This act is recorded and will be included in the prosecution record. You have 30 seconds to cease fire and comply with the arbitration order. The response was another volley. This one struck the Long Watch. The ship rocked. DOS was thrown against her restraints. The lights went out, came back, went out, came back. A panel sparked and died. Shields at 40%, said Rennick. Next direct hit will breach. Understood. On the main screen, the planet killer loomed. Huge. Silent. Nearly complete. In 30 hours, it would fire. In 30 hours, 4 billion people on Vale Prime would die. Unless 7 people in 3 ships stopped it. Which they could not do. Which they had never been able to do. Which was not, they had decided, the point. The point was to be here. To be seen. To make the act of genocide require firing through witnesses. Through people. Through the small, stubborn, ridiculous persistence of 7 humans who had been told to show up and had shown up. The separatist fleet fired again. And again. The shields dropped. 20%. 10. The Quiet Meridian took another hit and lost its starboard engine. It drifted, but it held position. The Small Kindness was dark now, running on emergency power, but it had not moved. It sat in the firing corridor like a stone in a stream. On the Long Watch, the lights were red. Emergency power. The air was cold and smelled of burnt wiring. DOS sat in her chair. Her hands were steady. Her face was steady. She watched the main screen. Watched the plasma bolts come. Watched the shields drop. Shields at 5%, said Rennick. His voice was flat. Calm. The calm of a man who had done the arithmetic and accepted the answer. Broadcast still live? DOS asked. Still live, said Marin. The whole galaxy is watching. Good. The next volley would breach the shields. The one after that would breach the hull. DOS knew this. Rennick knew this. Everyone on all 3 ships knew this. They had known it since they left the Concordance system. Maybe longer. Maybe they had known it for 900 years, in the quiet, in the cold, in the long watches when there was nothing to do but wait and wonder if anyone remembered they existed. The separatist fleet charged its weapons for the final volley. And then the space behind the 3 small ships tore open. Not one fold. Not 10. 43. The Concordance defense fleet dropped out of folded space in a wall of light and metal. 43 ships. Not an armada. Not enough to match the planet killer. But enough. Enough to fill the sky. Enough to fill the firing corridor behind the 3 small ships. Enough to say you will not fire through them without firing through us too. Admiral Koss's voice came over the channel, broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Koss, Concordance Defense Fleet. We are here in support of the arbitration patrol. All separatist vessels, cease fire immediately. You are outgunned. You are surrounded. And you are being watched by every species in the Concordance. Stand down. The separatist fleet hesitated. 200 ships against 43. The math was not in their favor. But the planet killer was behind them. The weapon. The reason. They could still fire. They could still. You have 10 seconds, said Koss. The separatist commander opened a channel. His face was tight. Angry. Afraid. You cannot stop us. The weapon will be completed. Vale Prime will not be fired upon. Not today. Not while those 3 ships are in the corridor. Not while my fleet is behind them. Not while 412 senators are watching this broadcast and deciding what to do about the separatist leadership. Koss paused. 10 seconds. 9. 8. The separatist fleet stood down. Not all at once. Not gracefully. Ships powered down their weapons one by one, reluctantly, like dogs called off a fight. Some broke formation and ran, folding out of the drift into the dark. Others held position, engines cold, waiting. The planet killer hung in the silence. Incomplete. Silent. A monument to a plan that had almost worked. On the bridge of the Long Watch, Doss let out a breath she had been holding for 5.5 days. Her hands were shaking. She put them flat on the armrests and pressed down until they stopped. Broadcast still live? She asked. Still live, said Marin. Doss nodded. She looked at the screen. At the 43 ships behind her. At the 200 ships in front of her, going dark. At the planet killer, silent and still. Open a channel, she said. All frequencies. The channel opened. This is Commander Yael Doss, Arbitration Patrol, 9th Rotation. The enforcement action is complete. The violation has been contained. Construction of the weapon has been halted. The Concordance will proceed with arbitration and prosecution under the terms of the Charter. She paused. And to the Senate. To all of you watching. Thank you. For remembering that we were here. For showing up. It has been a very long watch. The channel closed. Doss leaned back in her chair. The padding was still thin. The armrests were still cracked. The ship was still cold. But the lights were steady now, and the hull was not creaking, and outside the viewport, 43 ships hung in formation around 3 small ones, and the stars looked a little less cold than they had in 900 years. Rennick looked at her. So, what now? Doss thought about it. About the 912 years. About the patches and the cold and the ration packs. About the 7 people who had kept a promise no one remembered asking them to keep. Now, she said, we go home. The Concordance Senate voted, 3 days later, to decommission the Arbitration Patrol. Not to disband it. To complete it. 912 years of service, formally recognized, formally concluded. The Charter was amended. Article 9 was rewritten. Enforcement would no longer fall to a single, forgotten crew on a route no one remembered. It would be shared. Distributed. A responsibility carried by all, not dumped on 7. The 3 ships were brought into dock at the Concordance capital. Real docks. Warm ones. With engineers and tools and replacement parts. The Long Watch was patched properly for the first time in centuries. The quiet Meridian's stabilizer was replaced. The small Kindness was given a new coolant system and a coat of paint, because someone in the dockyard thought it looked like it needed one. The 7 crew members were given quarters on the station. Real quarters. With heating. With windows that looked out at a city, not at stars. With food that was not reconstituted protein. With beds that did not vibrate with engine hum. Tobin slept for 19 hours. Cale sat in a park on the station's agricultural level and watched actual plants grow and cried, quietly, for an hour. Merrin spoke. Not 10 words. A full conversation. 40 minutes with a journalist who wanted to know what it was like, out there, in the dark. She told him. All of it. The cold. The silence. The years. The way you learned to love the sound of the hull creaking because it meant the ship was still alive. The way you learned to love the other 6 people because they were the only 6 people there. Old Davin did not go to the park. He did not speak to journalists. He went to the observation deck and stood at the window and looked at the planet below. The real planet. The one with ground and weather and people walking on it. He pressed his hand against the glass. He stood there for a long time. Lena walked the station. Every level. Every corridor. She touched the walls. Real walls. Station walls. Not hull plating. Not the thin, cold metal of a ship that had been patched so many times you could feel every scar. She walked for hours. She went to the market level and bought a piece of fruit, an actual piece of fruit, and ate it standing in the middle of the crowd, and the juice ran down her chin, and she laughed. She had never tasted fruit before. She had been born in space. She had lived her entire life in 3 small ships. And the fruit was sweet and cold and real, and she laughed until people stared. Rennick went to the medical bay. He had the burn scar on his cheek looked at. The medic said it could be treated. Reduced. Maybe removed entirely, with a few sessions. Rennick said no. He said he wanted to keep it. He said it was the only proof he had that the years were real. That he had been there. That it had happened. The medic nodded and wrote it down and did not argue. Doss went to the Senate chamber. Not for a session. The chamber was empty. She walked in alone. She stood at the center of the floor, where the speakers stood, where the votes were called. She looked up at the gallery. 412 empty seats. She thought about Gorath, who had called the vote. About Orenti, who had argued for the fleet. About Vass, who had called them a disappointment and then, in the final vote, had voted yes. She stood there for a long time. Then she turned and walked out. The ceremony was held a week later. The full Senate. Every species. Every delegation. The 7 crew members stood on the chamber floor in dress uniforms that had been made for them. New and stiff and slightly wrong in the shoulders, because they were not used to clothes that fit properly. Gorath spoke. He spoke for 20 minutes. About the charter. About the patrol. About 912 years. About the weight of small ships. About the difference between a myth and a promise. About how the Concordance had forgotten, and how forgetting was its own kind of violence, and how the 7 people standing before him had absorbed that violence for 9 centuries without complaint. He presented them with the Concordance Medal of Service. 7 medals. He pinned each one himself. When he reached Doss, he paused. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither spoke. He pinned the medal. She nodded. He nodded. That was enough. Then Orenti spoke. Briefly. She said, "You were not a myth. You were never a myth. You were 7 people doing a job. And we are sorry it took us 900 years to notice. And we are sorry it took a planet killer to make us show up. And we are sorry, and we will not be sorry again. Because we will remember. From now on. We will remember." The chamber applauded. It was not the polite, procedural applause of a budget vote. It was loud. Sustained. Real. 412 senators, standing, clapping for 7 people in stiff uniforms who had kept a promise in the dark for longer than anyone could reasonably ask. Doss stood in the applause. She did not smile. She did not cry. She stood very still, with her hands at her sides, and let the sound wash over her. Beside her, Rennick was crying, openly, without shame. Lena was smiling. Tobin was clapping along, uncertainly, as if he was not sure he was allowed to clap for himself. Marin stood with her eyes closed. Cale flexed his 3 fingers. Old Davin looked at the ceiling, at the high, vaulted ceiling of the Senate chamber, and breathed. The applause went on. And on. And on. And for the first time in 912 years, the Long Watch was not alone. 6 months later, the 3 ships were decommissioned. Formally. With paperwork and signatures and a small ceremony in the dockyard. The Long Watch was to be preserved. A museum piece. A monument. Its hull would be cleaned, its patches documented, its nameplate polished. Visitors would walk its corridors and look at the thin padding on the commander's chair and the ring stains on the galley table and the 2 toggles on the weapons console, and they would try to imagine 900 years in a space that small. They would not be able to. No one could. But they would try, and that was something. Doss was offered a position. Senate liaison. Advisory role. A desk, an office, a title. She declined. She said she was tired. She said she wanted to sit somewhere warm for a while. She said she wanted to sleep in a bed that did not vibrate. She said she wanted to eat a meal that was not reconstituted. She said she wanted, for the first time in 19 years, to have nowhere to be. The Senate gave her a pension. A real one. Enough to live on. Enough to rest. She took it. She rented a small apartment on the station's residential level with a window that faced the planet, and she sat by the window in the mornings and watched the sun come up over a world she could, if she wanted, walk on. She did not walk on it. Not yet. She was not ready. But she watched it. Every morning. The sun came up. The light changed. The world turned. And she sat in a warm room, in a chair with good padding, and watched, and breathed, and did not check the hole for stress fractures. Rennick joined the new enforcement authority. The one the Senate had built to replace the patrol. A real organization. Funded. Staffed. Rotated. No one would serve more than 5 years. No one would be alone. No one would patch their own engine couplings with salvaged parts and a prayer. Rennick was a training instructor. He taught young officers how to hail a vessel under the charter. How to cite the relevant statutes. How to hold position when the shields were failing and the plasma bolts were coming and the whole thing seemed absurd and hopeless and small. You don't hold position because you can win, he told them. You hold position because someone has to be there. Because showing up is the whole job. The rest is paperwork. Lena went to the planet. The actual planet. She took a shuttle down. She stood on the ground. Real ground. Dirt and grass and wind. She stood there for an hour, not moving, feeling the gravity pull at her in a way that was different from the ship's artificial spin. Heavier. More real. She kicked the dirt with her boot. She picked up a stone. She put it in her pocket. She went back up to the station, but she kept the stone. She kept it on her nightstand. She touched it every morning. A small, cold, real thing. Proof that the ground existed. That the world was not just a viewport. That there was somewhere to stand. Tobin went back to school. Engineering. Real engineering, at a real academy, with teachers and tools and ships that were not falling apart. He was 25. He had missed most of his youth in the cold, in the dark, patching couplings and pressing cold packs to his shoulder. He was angry about it, sometimes. Quietly. He did not say it often. But it was there, under the surface, a small, hard knot of resentment that he carried alongside the metal and the memories. He would carry it for a while. Maybe always. But he was learning. And the ships he built in class were new and clean and did not creak. Marin wrote a book. Not a memoir. A technical manual. Long-range communications in deep space, a practical guide. It was dry. Precise. Full of frequencies and signal protocols and troubleshooting flowcharts. It was dedicated to the quiet ones who listen. It sold modestly. It was used in 3 academies. Marin did not do interviews. She did not give readings. She sent the manuscript to a publisher and went back to her apartment and did not speak to anyone for a week and was content. Cale opened a repair shop. Small. On the station's industrial level. He fixed things. Engines, heaters, coolant systems, hull plating. He fixed them properly, with real tools and real parts, and he did not patch them. He replaced them. He did it slowly, carefully, with his 3 fingers, and the work was good. People came to him because his work was good. Because he understood, in his hands, in the way he held a wrench, what it meant to fix something that had been broken for a long time. What it meant to make it whole. Old Davin went home. He had a home. A small house on a colony world, bought with savings he had not touched in 53 years. He went there. He walked in. He stood in the kitchen. He opened the window. He smelled the air. Real air. Not recycled. Not scrubbed. Not cold. He stood at the window for a long time. Then he made a cup of tea. Real tea. With leaves and hot water and a cup that was not dented. He sat down. He drank it. He looked out the window at the garden, at the sky, at the world turning slowly under a sun that was not dying. He stayed. And the long watch sat in the museum. Clean. Polished. Still. Its corridors were warm now, heated by the station's systems. The galley table was preserved behind glass, ring stains and all. The commander's chair was roped off, with a small placard, Commander Yael Doss, Arbitration Patrol, 9th Rotation. 19 years of service. 912 years of watch. Visitors came. School groups. Tourists. Historians. They walked the corridors. They touched the walls, gently, reverently. They looked at the 2 toggles on the weapons console. They looked at the patches on the hull, documented now, labeled, each one a small story of survival. And sometimes, late at night, when the museum was closed and the lights were dim, the long watch creaked. Just a little. Just once. The sound of old metal settling. The sound of a ship that had carried 7 people through 900 years of cold and silence and forgetting, and had brought them, at last, to a place where someone remembered their name. The creak faded. The ship was still. The watch was over. The end.